Welcome to Worldbuild with Us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilferty, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Christopher Prunty. Gentlemen, good to have you on, as always. So happy to virtually see you. On today's episode, we're concluding our patron prompt into the City of a Thousand Echoes, a city where the dead commingle among the living, built on a massive geothermal spot that also causes space and time to warp around it. And on last episode, we ended on a twist, which was, it's a trap. So, gentlemen, how do we reconcile It's a Trap with our giant floating megacity?
I incorporated the twist of It's a Trap into my factions, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, let's not jump ahead to factions quite yet. So let's go ahead and do the twist bit a little bit differently, if that's the case. So Daniel, is your twist also built into one of your factions or conflicts?
No, I wasn't really sure what to do with the twist. I was thinking of what the twist shouldn't be, because I feel like there's a lot of obvious things, that would pop up. And I think we probably want to avoid the obvious. Like my first thought is obviously, the twist is that whatever lies within the rift is evil and it's going to screw everyone over. Like, obviously that we don't want to do that. That's dumb. So I was trying to think of what are the
Well,
the
thank you
traps?
very much, Daniel. I've now got to rethink my twist part. So
Or, it can't be as straightforward as it's an eldritch entity in the rift and it's going to suck everyone's brains out. Okay,
Stop,
obviously.
Wow. Okay, you're 2 for 2 now, Daniel. Thanks. I really wanted to incorporate mind flayers into the setting, but I guess we're not doing
Exactly.
that now.
And the other thing, the echoes are actually evil, and they're our evil versions of ourselves. Those are the kind of things we know when you hear rift.
Okay,
and you hear
so that's actually the one I didn't want to do. Is that everyone just has a goatee compared to their original version,
right? I think a lot of the times when I guess it's important to think about because I'm not providing a real solution, a real answer to what you're asking, but I think it's important when we're world building to be mindful of the tropes that are tired. And I think those are tired tropes, and if you're going to use one, you absolutely could use a tired trope, but you've got to spin it in such a way that someone goes, I've heard that before, but I haven't heard it done that way. That's what I mean.
Right. And that kind of brings me to what I was thinking about in terms of the twist, which was, what does this rift, what does this city, what does this setting tend to represent?
Right.
And I was thinking that it comes to represent our inability to let go.
Yeah, I like that.
So that was kind of painting my theme and my approach to the twist. Because, when I think of, I also wanted to break down the twist a little bit in that, it's a funny Admiral Akbar quote, right? That it's kind of been memeified, but It's a Trap implies that there is some kind of foresight and there is some kind of intent behind it. There seems to be an intention of deception, right? That's kind of how
what we have planned. The trap is you've planned a danger for someone in advance.
Exactly. And so kind of going back to what we were thinking, where the planet is an entity, I was thinking that in some way, right? And also building off of this idea that it represents the inability to let go, I had this idea that this planet is essentially trapping people in their inability to let go, which is why they find their loved ones and even themselves so often. Out of all the planets that we come to explore and colonize, why does this one suddenly have human dead people on it? Human living, and part of that is obviously a spatial and time rift, but the other part of it is that this rift is manifesting those memories, so it's not entirely random. It's drawing from the people who come and visit it, and in that way it's almost like an angler fish, that's just kind of here's what you want, stay a while and listen, like that, and then essentially trapping the people there.
So is it kind of like Solaris? Sorry.
I don't know what Solaris is.
So it's like this living like planet kind of lake that has a similar psychic phenomenon to it.
Oh. Yeah, see, the only living planets I'm aware of are Unicron and Ego, the living planet from Marvel. So
What about
I can't
Oa?
really.
Is that a
What?
living
What?
planet? Is Oa a living planet?
What's that?
It's the one that's a Green Lantern.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll toss him in there. All right. Them in there, I suppose.
True.
So Daniel, like I actually, like I joked previously, but like I don't want the planet to just necessarily be evil,
Right.
where it's like, but I think that that's just kind of what happens to the people on this planet. Like it needs to, I treat it kind of like Galactus. It needs to feed on something. And it might not necessarily be killing these people as they're, like creating the echoes, but it is kind of like, hey, I'm feeding off of you just as much as you're feeding off of me type thing. It's intentional that I'm doing this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it makes me think of Solaris because like the beings that lived in the planet like are kind of accidentally awakened, and then it causes all kinds of psychological traumas and people end up killing themselves and killing others because of it. But it's not like the beings are trying to hurt them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. See, I this is where this is where your expertise in sci-fi, or at least knowledge of sci-fi
Yeah.
comes in, because again, I'm less familiar with sci-fi in general.
But no, I think that it's not. I'm not saying though that what you're talking about is like in any way rip off or is too similar. No, but it's just in the same like category, which is cool. Because our
Mm-hmm.
riff sounds very different than others.
Right. So, Chris, what was your faction associated to the twist?
The faction that I had in mind for the twist, I wanted to play upon the trapping aspect. And I know that we said that echoes would be somewhat rare, but I wanted the study of them and the study of the act of consciousness to be very prevalent. And I came up with a organization or a company called Boltzmann Administrative Solutions.
Okay.
And what they do is they trap consciousness either of an echo of or of a quote unquote living person, and they clone it. So it's not essentially you and it's not essentially them, but they see the echoes or consciousness as a whole as it's not your dead relative. It's not a past life. It's not a future you. I found this philosophical thing called the Boltzmann brain, that it believes if everything is possible, then out of the universe, eventually a consciousness will spontaneously come into existence, not one that is connected to a body, just one that has it. And they believe that these consciences are just spontaneous bits that, for complete random reasons, act or talk like past loved ones or current loved ones or just people in general. And I wanted them to be behind kind of putting them in brain in a jar kind of style things of, all right, you are now going to administer this house, you are going to do this program, or even in a malicious way to be a weapon where you kind of raise this consciousness, prod at it, do horrible things to it, and then you're like, all right, we're going to put you into an autonomous drone and just let you loose, but only give you enough battery for 30 minutes.
I feel like you've been playing a lot of Cyberpunk lately.
Some of that is cyberpunk related.
I like the Boltzmann brain reference though.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's actually very cool. Yeah, let's not vie away from that.
And what on that thread, I was also coming up with the fact that you can run into your future self. If the future self gives you information for the future, is that in fact committing suicide because the future you that should have existed never had that information?
Oh yeah.
And
I mean, are they parallel future yous? Or are they like, is this a loop where your actions cause the future to happen no matter what? That's another question.
Yeah, if you said that you were going to give your past self $1 million and it was 5 years ago, at what point are you giving that $1 million to a totally different person?
Right.
And then the existential dread sets in, and yeah, that's my faction.
All right. So full of existential dread and science. Sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of like intellectualizing what they think is happening in the rift, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
But also doing it for profit. And I want it to be the mixture of both science and also, in a weird way, magic, in the fact that think of it as like necromancers making seals, or circuitry is actually like runes, something that's keeping these
You and your goddamn
ghosts
runes, I swear to
contained.
God.
What? I love runes. What of?
Okay. So I also like runes, but I've never loved runes the way that you love runes. Let's just put it that way.
I love digging and I love runes.
And farming.
So are they like responsible for building the equipment that can trap echoes?
Correct.
Okay.
Hmm.
They're kind of like the Ghostbusters of the setting.
The way that I picture it is imagining it something weird's happening in your building. It was just like, yeah, the elevator has just been going on and up and down for the last 12 hours. We don't see anything mechanically wrong with it, so we need one of your technicians to come in and take a look. And it
de-spook it.
Yeah, and it's just like, all right, no one's allowed to see what I'm doing. And he's actually, in a way, performing something akin to like an exorcism, but also a psychotherapy.
What's that game that people are into now that deals with ghosts? Investigators.
Phantasma?
Oh, Phasmophobia?
Phasmophobia.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Phantasma
about.
is a movie.
Phantasm is great.
Yeah. Boy!
Sorry, I had to try my best Angus scrim there, you know. Anyway, yeah. So we've got Ghostbusters, but like high end. So the idea of Ghostbusters originally was like schlubby blue collar workmen.
Yes.
This sounds like the opposite, where it's like, hey, we've got fancy science philosopher kings running this shit, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. I think that's the natural consequence of the situation, which makes sense.
And I like to think that they pick the people who are these technicians, that they don't view them as ghosts or anything that's truly like supernatural or weird. They're just like, oh God, this fucking thing's on the haywire again. Why can't you just behave?
They don't give a shit. It's just their work.
Yeah. Well, if we're moving, I feel like with the twist kind of thoroughly explored, and we're already moving into factions. Daniel, tell us all about your faction.
My thinking for my faction was, I was thinking back on the movie Flatliners, where in that movie the characters basically induce like near-death experiences. They're trying to explore what that is. I was thinking we've got these echoes wandering around, and some of them represent your future selves, and obviously people would be super interested in that. So I'm thinking there is a group of people who, whether they're a company or they're maybe like some group that operates under the radar, that gets they capture echoes, and what they do through whatever technology they have is try to explore their future lives. So rather than the echo trying to inhabit a person, which would be expected with a ghost, the person trying to inhabit the echo and try and see what their future life is. So I'm thinking kind of like, like astral travel or like dream travel. They're doing that with the echo to see what the future could be for themselves and to live that future, even though it's an echo of their future that they can't actually access. So like if they find an echo that when they interact with it, it's like, oh, this echo had experienced some trauma, or maybe it had like a wonderful, rich life because of its future. It's like wealthy and it died happily. And so to experience that, they capture it and then they inject their own consciousness into it temporarily. So they're like memory or future delvers of some kind.
So are they like archivists in a way as well?
I'm sure that there are some that are trying to like save the information, but I think the majority of them, just like the flatliners, like they're in it for the experience and for the experience of the unknown. Like it's a thrill to them.
I have
Gotcha.
not seen.
So are they commercializing this in some way? Is there like some like company out there that's like, hey, we can give you this experience over and over again, that type of thing?
I would say that would be cool. I imagine how this might start is it's an unknown thing or technology. There's a small group exploring this and it's dangerous. And maybe like the
Mhm.
conflict in that group is one of them's like, oh, we could sell this. And then the person who started is like, no, we're supposed to be doing this because we need to find out, the truth about our future. But then that person's like, but no, we could turn this into like a commercialized type endeavor. And then there's like a conflict.
I feel like every well-meaning venture
Yeah.
always ends up with but money though.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
with yeah, like that's basically what happens to everything,
Uh-huh. I mean, maybe
And
it could even be this Delver group. They either splintered off, or maybe the original scientists had some interest in it, and they're trying to flatline their way into their loved one, or something. Who knows?
Mhm,
Wow,
mhm.
that sounds so dark. I'm gonna flatline into one of my loved ones.
Yep.
Yeah, that's horrifying.
I picture it as like a ragtag group. Like maybe
Yeah.
the goal is something more lofty. Like it is for the experience, but maybe it's just like there is a coming catastrophe that we need to learn about, and we
Oh,
can prevent it if we can find someone who actually understood what was happening.
that would be cool too. Yeah, that's
See,
awesome.
yeah, now that's like this extra like sub
Mhm.
story that's being told, and I love that. I feel like that's probably a really good sign of an excellent setting, is that you have like all of these different story ideas that you get from exploring the world and kind of building it up even further.
It's like having different like parties, like to play the campaign,
Oh,
with different goals.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, of course. And that's how you know it's fun and good, when you're doing
Yeah.
it that way, for sure. So it's funny you should mention that, you're doing like an experience, of like, and again, we're kind of building off of that theme of not being able to let go in a certain extent, right?
Mhm.
And I kind of wanted to play a little bit with that with my faction, but in the opposite way. In that my faction I wanted, let's not over explain. Hold on. I wanted to explore the people who are actually working in the area with the rift, right? So these are people who have not yet. These are people who are basically the lowest of the low. They are the people with almost nothing left to lose, people who have like nothing left to lose and essentially nothing to hold on to, like nothing that kind of keeps them, which actually, like, their squalor and dereliction essentially keeps them to be the prime targets for the people who are doing the work in the rift, because they're the ones who are least likely to get stuck. They're the ones who are least likely um, to get caught up in these spatial and time rifts. And it's like, fuck it, we need to live for the right now. We need to live for this moment. Otherwise, we will, like, I have nothing left. And it's like you have to pick these people who are on the lowest of the low. Otherwise, I have a family, I have money, like I don't want to let go of this. And so they get drawn into that spatial rift even further. That's kind of the interpretation that I'm going with.
It's like Lower Decks. It's like the characters who in
Don't
Lower Decks.
you dare bring up Lower Decks, Daniel.
What?
I mean, I wasn't super into Lower Decks, but I like the idea of like let's look at what the people who are on the lowest rung, what they have to deal with, and what their perspective is of this whole situation.
Okay. If when you put it that way, I will allow you to bring up Lower
I'm
Decks.
glad we
Yeah,
got
like
that
I
trip.
appreciate Lower Decks premise,
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But and that's basically what I'm going with here. I want
Yeah.
to, and I imagine them being called runners,
Oh, okay.
because it's like, and really just like playing up this like daredevil aspect of it,
Mhm.
almost, where this is all I got.
They got
Like,
nothing to lose. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like this is all I got. I've got nowhere to go. And then eventually, like, if you do it enough, there is potential for you to get caught up in being like, oh, well, I can't do this anymore.
Mhm.
And there's almost potentially a cyclical aspect that could happen, where you get out of this immense poverty by doing the running enough. And then once you're out, you're like, oh, well, I didn't change any of my behavior. So I'm basically going to go right back into it because I don't know how to spend or save or, move in the social circles, so to speak,
Mhm.
Would you
Yeah.
say that they live in like the shadows of society?
No, not really. I mean, they're basically homeless folks. So, well, I mean, what would you consider the shadow of society, Chris?
Where people don't look. Vagabonds. Homeless people I do see living in the shadows, as it were. Thieves.
See,
That sounds really negative about homeless
well,
people, but
yeah. See, that's the thing. Like, I would argue that they exist, but people try to ignore them. So it's not like they're in the shadow. It's not like they're trying to hide. It's that people ignore them. I find that to be very different than those who are, like you don't see, like criminal organizations out and about all the time. Like but you do see homeless folks around the city. That's the difference that I'd want to make. Like in terms of shadow, I
I mean,
guess.
when you talked about them, I was also thinking of like just the lowest rung of worker as well. Like,
Oh
because
yeah.
you said that there are people that need to work in or near the rift, and you have to be dangerous. It's dangerous there. I was thinking like, your jumpsuited janitor or your lowest
Mm-hmm.
level security worker who has no name. They don't really. He has the name tag. Nobody remembers his name or her name, and they're the ones that get shit on and have to do the dirty work.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, shit. It's not. It could even be something like, and this is going to sound real dumb, but do you guys know Deadliest Catch, which is all about like crab fishing?
No.
yes.
Okay, so that was a show that ran on Discovery that I actually don't know if it's still running or not, but it ran for a long time, and it basically, shows like, hey, these are the fishermen who go out in insanely dangerous waters to catch Alaskan king crab, which is very expensive, right?
Mhm.
And so you, you're like, why does that make sense here? It's because when you actually follow the people who work on those boats, many of them are drug addicts. Many of them are, like caught in this cycle of addiction or abuse, or and like if they're not working, then they would like easily tumble down a worse hole. Now, mind you, this is not all of them, but and because I want to make this clear, like it's not like I'm saying all fishermen are fucking addicts or anything like that, because that's not the case at all.
Obviously,
I
that's
just
what
want to
you
make that
mean.
clear.
Like every fisherman out there is a drug
Well,
addict.
it's kind of like food service. Not every food service person is
Yes,
a
yeah,
chain smoking divorcee that has a heroin and alcohol problem.
it's not heroin, it's cocaine in food service.
You're
To be
right.
fair,
You're
Only in
right.
New
yeah.
England.
My apologies.
Yeah, exactly. But right, but that's kind of the stereotype that goes around it. Like, but those are the people that attracts, right? Like that type of work attracts because it's like I can make a shit ton of money for like backbreaking labor for a couple of weeks. Sure, I'll do that. Like that's the type of person who's like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. You know. Um,
Well, you
but
could
anyway,
die, and some people find that alluring.
also that, and yeah, exactly. Let's move away from this incredibly dark subject and talk about some conflicts that we got going on. Daniel, why don't you start us off this time?
So the conflict I had kind of I would tie in, I think, with what Chris was talking about with his faction of ghost busting administrators, white glove Ghostbusters. I'm thinking there may be a group of people who hunt specific echoes, and these are the ones that
Oh,
are potential futures of people, to create a market in futures. So the conflict there, of course, is that it's like you're creating like a self-fulfilling prophecy that way, like by hunting these potentials. So like if I'm let's say I'm a businessman and I want to find out if my business is going to succeed, I hire this group to go into the rift and find my future self and see what they can glean from that, to see what the potential is for its success. and then you come back with that information, and then you manipulate the market with it. So you end up with people who are almost like betting against themselves. So, and then of course the danger is you're really creating your own future that way, because you're tilting things in the favor of that future. So it's kind of like a faction conflict mixed together. And I think since I was going to say, like, I think since Chris mentioned his faction, I think that would tie in pretty well.
I can see the influence of how much you've been reading Wall Street Bets in your faction.
Yeah, I'm sure that definitely seeped into my mind. Like, these are like, does that mean there's like a Reddit group that's part of a sub faction that's like competing against the big hedge fund version of this group?
They find all the successful futures and then hide
Yes.
them away.
Yes. And then they extort the larger company for it. Jimmy to the moon.
So wait, are they essentially trading their future for their present? Is that what they're doing? They're literally trading away their futures?
Yes, they are. Because they're not living in the moment. They're banking on they're wasting their present time to try and achieve a future that's not necessarily real.
That is such a mind fuck. And I kind of fucking dig it, actually. Oh, man.
I could totally see Wall Street Bets, though. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And yeah, the name of your company, by the way, is like the Wayland. No, it's like Wayland Soltai Betting, like something like that. Just give it the same names, all that bullshit. Yeah.
Time in hand care.
Oh my god. Time in hand care, yes.
That's yep, okay.
Yes, time in hands.
Oh, god damn it.
Their phrase is hold in all caps.
I think you mean hold the line.
Hold the line, yeah.
Yeah. Oh god. Yep.
My conflict was going to be what it means to be human, and kind of a story that I wanted to have is the spoilers is, have you ever seen Moon?
Yeah, of course.
No, I love Moon.
Yeah.
I'm picturing some very talented middle manager or bureaucrat, accountant or something that doesn't know that his mind has been copied 1,000 times over, and he's actually been working at millions of places, never seeing any profit from it, but he's essentially enslaved across this city doing menial tasks for just counting. And he doesn't realize it until he kind of digs a little bit deeper and then starts seeing shadows of himself everywhere.
Irregularities.
Yeah, imagine like not the little, but his conscious everywhere is constantly trying to like call out to him and be like, free us. And it's kind of like his own personal matrix of him trying to free himself from there.
But
Wow.
for some reason, I'm picturing this as like they would find the most perfectly banal, boring, like he is made to be a worker drone. Like that's basically who he is. He's like, oh, I really enjoy filling out those reports. Like that's the type of person he is. And so they found like the most agreeable person to copy. And the one who's like, I've got to free myself is actually like the weird derivation. Like he's like the one who's like, wait, we love doing this. Why are you trying to stop us from doing our work?
Well, he's a degradation. Like, having been copied so much, he finally has a sense of autonomy.
That's great. I actually really appreciate that aspect of it.
It also fits into your faction, because this could be happening in your worker faction.
Yeah, I could see some person just getting promoted throughout the years, and due to the fact of management changing and other things happening, they don't even realize what they're doing until he gets to like an upper level, and he's just like, wait a minute, these administrative echoes, who are they based on? Oh, I don't know, look up the source material. And then he sees it, and it's just like a moment that's just like, oh fuck.
I just love it's like a psychic version of Moon, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking of like, what do you mean or it's like, you know how it's like, oh, every office has a Richard, like that type of thing.
Oh,
But then
God.
it's like making that
They
literal.
really do.
Yeah,
Literally.
it's like literally everyone has a Richard. Yeah.
That is awesome.
I could also see the chain reaction of something that causes them to rebel is not so much like dividing by zero, but just someone who is trying to cover up their own like shady accounting. And like all of the administrative bots are just like, no, that doesn't make sense. And it's just like trying to brute force. It was just like, no, these numbers do add up. And it's just like, no, they don't.
So, in actually, that sounds like a feature, not a bug. It sounds like, hey, we're trying to keep the accounting honest here. Guess what? We've got Richard. All right. Richard's the one who's going to make sure your accounting stays honest. That type of thing.
God, I see the advertisement for that, and it's just horrifying.
It's just like this like slightly pudgy white guy with like black glasses and balding, and he's like got a pocket protector and stuff like that, and he's like, I'm here to serve, like I'm here to do my part, until of course, like one day he basically goes crazy and murders his entire family and then hops on a plane and is never seen for 18 years.
Well, for 18 years. Jesus.
You see, the problem is when they decided to upgrade from Richard to Smith, it became a massive movie of falling down on a citywide scale.
Actually, I like that more than like the mass revolt. It's like, I'm not obsolete. You're obsolete. This whole damn this whole damn organization's obsolete. Just because we've got this new Smith model doesn't mean that I'm not gonna, but he's like super even keeled about it and shit like that.
Well, there's an opportunity too for some fun like reversals and surprises if the premise isn't known, because the group could contain a future Richard, and the current Richard doesn't realize that's future Richard, and future Richard doesn't want to tell present Richard that fact, and so then you realize, everyone in the party is Richard.
It's Richard's all the way down,
right? Which should be an amazing like reveal.
Oh man, but how do you? Okay, but how do you reconcile that? Yeah, it's like,
well, so
you
like
got
if they're
fucking hacked up in a combine and like different Richards came out.
You could have like at least 3, right? You could have future Richard who's too old to be recognizable. Maybe he has a rough future, right? You could have a Richard who wears like a containment suit because he was damaged in a rift accident. You could have present Richard who looks like Richard. So that's at least 3 Richards.
Okay, right, but why wouldn't like damaged Richard notice the other Richards look like him, how he used to look?
Maybe they don't know. Like, okay. Oh, you mean why wouldn't future Richard recognize present Richard?
Yeah, that too.
Maybe they have incentives to not say anything to present Richard.
Okay, this just sounds like that episode of Futurama where you find out that the guy who's dating Leela is actually Fry from like an alternate reality or some shit.
Yeah. They've got to have like incentives to not tell present Richard is the whole gimmick,
This sounds like a game we need to make up, and like it sounds like a party game.
Don't tell Richard, that's what it's called. Don't tell Richard.
Actually, that in and of itself sounds really fun, because it sounds like if you tell him, he'll snap.
Yes.
And it's like the whole point of the game is to make sure that Richard doesn't snap.
Doesn't know. You gotta pull off the caper without revealing the secret.
Despite like mounting evidence. Yeah.
Yes. So it's like the guy in the suit. He can't take the suit off at any point. And old Richard has to make sure that he's wearing like significantly distracting clothing because he kind of looks like Richard,
But okay, all right.
There's also like female Richard, so it's a potential future where he was a different gender, So,
what is the female version of Richard?
It's Richard. She's just female.
Wouldn't it be Ricky?
Yeah, so she has a slightly different name.
Yeah,
but she's still Richard.
It'd be like Ricky Lake, Chris, you remember Ricky Lake, don't you? Wow, can't believe you've ignored TV icon Ricky Lake. That's just disrespectful.
Did you know that Judge Judy makes $47 million a year?
Still?
A year?
Yeah. Yes, a year.
Lord. Good for her. I love Judge Judy.
How
I
much?
mean, I know it's all fake and everything. I don't care.
That's
It's
amazing.
great.
What
That's
about
fantastic.
what about the Baylor? Does he make enough money?
He better
he
make
makes
good
minimum
money.
wage.
I love the bailiff.
He
Yeah.
doesn't make $50 an hour yet.
Yeah. Oh
Oh.
god. Hey, speaking of disenfranchised workers, that actually ties into my faction quite well,
Oh.
or my conflict quite well. So my conflict, I took a class last year in the 1930s, which is like this massive time of upheaval, and we also watched Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, where there are scenes where he is out of work for so long because the labor unions are on strike, and then he goes to work for a day once the strike is over, and then halfway through his lunch hour they go on strike again. And so the conflict that I actually wanted to talk about here was the constant threat of labor strikes, because I find that to be really fascinating. I also wanted to go a little bit left field with it, because think about the idea that the city is constantly growing and the city is constantly like expanding outward, right? There is on the fringe of this a labor union dispute 100% of the time. And whether it be like, and the whole concept is basically like, look, labor unions are going to be on strike when you're telling your story. That could be background information, that could be pertinent to the plot, but it's almost always happening because guess what? No one wants to pay these people what they're worth, and the labor unions are trying to save them from that.
So this is specifically with your faction of workers, right?
No, it's labor union in general. Doesn't have to be just with the lowest of the low. It could be in general. Unions are good, and so there's a constant threat of union strikes. There's an implication, of course, that the people there aren't getting paid well enough, which I think is also an interesting idea to kind of explore as well, but that's neither here nor there.
What's the sci-fi spin of this? Because like it's one thing to have the labor unions in the setting, which makes sense, but
why do I need a sci-fi spin, Daniel? They're sci-fi labor unions. There we go.
No, I think we do need a spin, because if you can't, like, you can take like some whatever mundane concept you want from the real world and plop it into fantasy or sci-fi, but we've got to take whatever that means for like what does labor unions mean for society, right? Like, and what can we extend, like amplify about that to make it interesting for the sci-fi?
I have an idea, and it comes to what is many people's fear and also of labor unions, automation.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I think it's called Better Than Us or Better Than Human. There was a faction called the Liquidators. As more and more people got replaced by machines, their entire thing besides going on strike was to either destroy the means of them making more machines or destroy the machines that had replaced their jobs.
That's what I mean. So like there's something about like that's taking the idea and pushing it into the future.
It's not because Luddites did that back when the Industrial Revolution was happening. This idea, this rejection of technology is a constant. Like I appreciate the idea of extrapolating into a sci-fi setting. I think that we don't always have to do something like that because it shows a reflection of our modern times and our modern problems. Like what it says is, oh, these problems still haven't been fixed even in the future. It grounds the setting more in reality. I mean, we can extrapolate, we can, extrapolate it to the point where it's like, oh, the work is different now. But realistically, I think that labor disputes are a constant, essentially.
Well, that's what I mean, though. Like, what are the labor disputes in the future then, in this future?
So you want to recontextualize what it means to be a labor dispute.
Exactly. So I mean, like it's so like for example, like you can say socialism still exists in the future, right? But like that's boring for sci-fi or for fantasy. We want to say socialism still exists in the future, and here's what it looks like in that future. So what does the labor dispute look like in that future? Like since we have the rift and we've got your workers, we've got
Daniel, we've been getting replaced by Richards for too long.
There you go. That's what I'm looking for, you know?
So we can do something like that. We can
Yeah,
also do something like I like the idea of just like work conditions fucking suck. We're
Uh-huh.
trying to make a city block on a fucking like on an ocean. Do you know how
Right,
difficult
right.
that must be?
And
Like
there's no safety regulations. People are
there's
falling into the
minimal safety
risks.
regulations, right?
Right.
There's only safety
Mhm.
regulations because labor unions exist.
Right. And so that's what I mean. So like now, because what we're really doing in sci-fi is we're trying to talk about the present, right? But we're hiding it in sci-fi language. So like that's what I'm asking. What's the sci-fi language of this setting to talk about labor unions and labor
See, I'd
disputes?
rather just be a fucking punch to the face and be like, no, fuck your future bullshit. This is the same thing that's been happening
But that's how we
forever
do
and
it in
will continue
sci-fi.
on.
Otherwise, it's
Well,
didactic, right? Nobody wants to read it.
not necessarily. Oh, no, because
Yeah,
that's a false. No.
that's
That's a false
absolutely what we do
statement.
in sci-fi.
Oh well, no. I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
You're arguing that if I don't wrap it in sci-fi
Yes.
tinsel, then people don't want to read it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have
they
an
won't.
entire bookshelf of like modernist fiction that explores stuff like that. I
Right,
want to
but
read
that's not
about
sci-fi,
that.
right? Like that's what I'm saying.
What?
But that's not sci-fi. Like so, like if I pick
No,
up,
but you don't. But I'm suggesting that like what I'm suggesting is that you don't need to gussy it up to make it interesting. Like we can extrapolate that idea, but my conflict is just kind of like a simple one, you know, like it's just like there, it exists, it's still there in the setting. I'm not trying to make like a whole I'm not trying to make a whole plot hook surrounding it, you know. I just want it to be there. I want it to be known and I want it to be in the setting. That's all I'm trying to suggest.
yeah, I'm just trying to push you to do that. Only because I feel like, when we read something like Neuromancer, right? Like we can talk about cyberpunk because it has like the language of sci-fi to talk about those issues, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about labor disputes, like we've got the Richards to talk about, cheapening labor, as and losing humanity. That's one way of saying that,
Sure.
which makes it easier to say. That's what I'm saying.
Well, if that's what we want to say, then we can also do
Mhm.
that with the runners as well.
Right,
You
exactly.
know, like we can go down that route as well. But
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be like, oh well, because to me, and maybe this is part of what I have trouble with when it comes to sci-fi,
Uh-huh.
is that it's like you don't need to call it, like it doesn't need to be Neo New York, like Tokyo or whatever it
Uh-huh.
is. I don't need the extra bells and whistles to talk about that shit sometimes.
Right.
Like there should be some universality that is separate from the setting. Like I should be able to understand like, hey, there's a labor union dispute. Okay, fucking get it. Like, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be like, well, what we're really talking about here is this in this sci-fi setting. It's like, no, what you're actually talking about is what we're actually talking about. Like I think that I take umbrage with the idea that every sci-fi thing has to have the veneer of sci-fi to talk about the thing rather than just talking about the thing. Does that make sense?
I guess kind of. I guess what I'm getting at is like it comes down to what then makes it science fiction, right? So like you've
Right.
got to have some of that what you're talking about, your veneer of
Right.
looking into the future for it to be a sci-fi. So if you had a novel that was just about labor disputes and there happened to be flying cars,
Right.
like now is that literary fiction that has some speculative trappings, or can we even call that sci-fi, right? Because now it's really a discussion of like labor, and it's got like some sprinkling of flying cars, whereas say it was about a bunch of Richards who have been cloned and cheapened labor, and there's a
Mhm.
group that's been created to deal with the dispute. Now you have a premise of sci-fi, right? But you're really
Mhm.
talking about labor dispute. That's the distinction I'm making.
See, I think what I'm trying to get at is some kind of like sci-fi version of magical realism, where
Right.
it's like this just so. And also the other thing I was kind of keeping in mind was
Mhm.
the setting in and of itself is already like entirely sci-fi, right?
Right, exactly.
So
Yeah.
why not keep the conflict that I wanted to focus on a little bit more grounded, so it can have like a little bit more grit to it compared to echoes and like high technology,
Right.
kind of concepts. So in a vacuum, I would agree that like if we're trying to make this sci-fi, we want to make sure that it's like about the sci-fi thing. But in this
Yeah.
setting that
Now I
we've
get it. Yeah,
created,
yeah. Mhm.
you know what I mean? Yeah.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that you don't have to have every labor dispute being about the same problem each time. It could be
Right.
indicative of how horrible things are, that every week it has to be like, oh god, they're taking away our lunch breaks now.
Because it
Mhm.
manifests in different ways, is what
Yeah.
you're saying, right? In all the ways
Yeah.
that the things we've come up with, right?
Yeah. And I like the idea that like despite this massive city that is constantly expanding, that is running off of this, essentially magical energy, right? Like this geothermal energy and the spatial rifts, despite all of that, people still aren't getting paid what they should be. And they're still trying, like things still aren't right. Like that's
Yeah.
what entices me about the idea behind it.
Yeah, and
Behind
that's
it?
like saying that this is
Behind
the
it.
present, exactly, which is like
Right.
the whole point of sci-fi, right?
Right. Plus, I like the idea that like it indicates that things are still kind of rotten. That's what I like about it. Yeah. I did not expect that part. I thought that was going to be like a fucking 2 minute, like this is what I'm talking about. There we
No,
go.
I love it because that's why we're here, like getting to have
Yeah.
those discussions, right?
Absolutely.
To form a
Absolutely.
labor union.
Now it's formal labor union.
Oh no! If you motherfuckers try and unionize, you're all gone. I'm getting new hosts.
Dwarves, our dwarf union.
Oh man, I'll write your contracts in runes, so Chris will be excited about
Thank you.
it.
Oh my god.
Oh my god! All right, let's move on to our hook creating process. I'm gonna go ahead and grab the dice and start there. Daniel, you know what I love about you?
I'm a pain in the ass.
Yes, absolutely. I love the fact that like we can have conversations like that and just be like, no, fuck you, sir.
Exactly.
Like, and it's like also like kind of we're like, hey, we get it. We're cool like that. Like anytime we can have serious disagreements
Yes.
is like, yeah, that's where I feel like shit should be. You know what I mean?
Because like what is the point if we're not gonna we gotta push our premises to the edge, right?
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah. And then eventually, like what always ends up or what often ends up happening, I should say, is okay, we've both talked to each other to the point where we understand what we're both trying to get at. Okay,
Right.
cool.
Well, I think the key is figuring what they're saying. Right, yeah. If you want to figure out what is the other person actually saying, they're oh, okay, now I see what they're saying. I mean, you may not agree, but hey, at least you get it,
Yes, absolutely. And then Chris is over there like, mommy and dad, please stop fighting.
I feel like I'm home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like my hot takes. Like everybody hates them and they do not agree, but hey, I'm going to give you them. I'm going to give you them anyway.
Yeah. Yep. I can understand why you think you're correct. I will also understand that you're wrong.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. All right. So let's go ahead and roll for the plot hook that we're going to be rolling in our City of 1,000 Echoes. So the first genre that we need to kind of reconcile with for the hook is going to be, gentlemen, how do we make this setting, which is a sci-fi setting, even more sci-fi than it already is? I'm expecting like space lasers of some kind. And
oh boy,
let's go ahead and give us an archetype that we can kind of work with. All right. So we've got the quest. So we've got a sci-fi quest in a sci-fi setting. Now, I actually think I've kind of got an idea based around this. And the quest is getting to the city in and of itself. We've already got the sci-fi part of it in the setting itself. So why not go from like, hey, we're in the mega city. Maybe the quest is just to get to that city in the first place for someone who doesn't live there.
Okay, I like that. So then how do we make it more sci-fi? There's a couple directions for making it more sci-fi. One direction could be you do super hard sci-fi, right? Another direction could be you do like really out there borderline spiritual experience 2001 sort of thing. Those are two possible directions, but which direction is more interesting?
See, my brain immediately, because we've actually played this setting pretty straight. And part of me is just like, burn it to the ground. Let's go real dumb and add space like swords to it and shit like that.
Space
But
swords.
space swords, yeah. Well, we can't say lightsabers because that's LucasArts will get us. So, or Disney now. Oh God, that's even
Disney
worse.
will come after you and take your kneecaps.
So you're thinking like, okay,
As a down payment.
Yes.
Let's go away from hard sci-fi. So then like,
oh no. I'd rather go hard sci-fi because
hard
like
sci-fi. Okay.
my dumb animal brain is like,
Okay.
and it's like, yeah.
Okay, so that means the journey is really about, is this planet like difficult to navigate through? And so it's like, a Wild West journey, but on through insane terrains, and it's a matter of survival in this alien wilderness, and so you're relying on what's actually possible in science to get there.
We did make it into an ocean-like planet, so it could be like a high seas adventure.
Okay.
And but not like a fun high seas adventure, like a pirate thing. Actually, we could make it like a Captain Phillips pirate thing, where it's like you're on a giant like cargo ship, essentially.
Could it be a submarine?
Oh, now we're going Das Boot. Okay, yeah, we can go Das Boot with it. That's fine.
So like the hard science comes in like dealing with a submarine and like an unusual alien ocean. Maybe it can also surface, but it's dangerous to surface.
Oh, can we just have it go from the bottom of the ocean to the top?
Oh yeah, sure.
Have like a Subnautica thing almost. Chris, you like that game, right?
Yeah, I'm a fan of that game. Also, we did say that it was pretty creepy. So what if the journey is told in the perspective of you started at the bottom of the ocean because time is weird. You start at the end of your journey.
Oh, weird. Oh, I'm into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, who's to say that your memories coincide with where your physical body is? So what if you're just like, all right, well, we're at the bottom and
Actually, that's horrifying because on your journey, you gain crew members rather than losing them.
So it's like a Tenet kind of journey, I guess. Like Christopher
I
Nolan.
refused to watch that movie because Christopher Nolan was like, I'm going to try and kill people by putting it in theaters. So, like, fuck that guy.
But it sounds like that. So we'll just throw the hard sides out the window and we'll go more with the crazy time stuff then, which I think is
that's
more
fine. That's fine. Yeah. All right. So we've got reverse time travel. Like, where did you come from? Who are you? What happened to you originally? Or actually, it also kind of sounds like the Return of the Obra Dinn. Have you ever played that? So that is a fantastic game where you are an insurance agent who is trying to figure out what happened to this ship that comes in, and it's like a ghost ship.
Oh.
And you have this magical like watch that basically lets you pick parts and watch what happened in that time.
Oh, that's awesome. I like that.
Yeah, so we could do like an Obra Dinn type thing with it. That'd be really cool.
There could be like detached echoes that have fallen into the ocean too.
Oh, that's even better. Yeah. Oh, maybe that's what maybe that's partly what echoes do is like they act as like ability to replay what happened in something. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, you could like convert them into the power to do that.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and roll our next and final world building plot hook, which is going to be rolled again. Hey, there we go. All right. Now, I feel like with a romance story, this can be pretty easy. Like, so what I would like to do is make it so it's not about falling in love with someone who's dead already. I want to take the echoes and try and remove it from that as much as possible. So how do we take a romance genre and apply it as a plot hook in our City of a Thousand Echoes?
I actually wanted to bring this up in the previous one, so feel free to disregard and create another one if it's not good enough. But I'm picturing one of the crew members like learning about his life and realizing he was married. And then suddenly that crew member comes back and he realizes that he lost his wife on this voyage.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great idea, and we're going to stick it with that other idea that we had before. Yeah, let's keep that for sure. But thank you for bringing it up. But how do we make a romance plot hook for this city?
We don't want to use the echoes. Let's see.
If we're using the echoes, I want to do it cleverly. I don't want to do it like, oh, it's my wife who died, and now I'm able to that's been done a million times. Exactly. We've literally already done that.
I mean, you could also do the her thing where it's all of these little AIs or echoes that are actually talking to thousands of people simultaneously.
See, now that for something like that actually sounds like a Richard subplot. Like Richard falling in love. That sounds kind of interesting. But let's try and keep it away from that even. Like I feel like we've exhausted the Richard tank so
Love
far.
by the
what
numbers.
about like class relation, like your worker people, one of them having a relationship with, I don't know, say someone at the inside of the rift who is a wealthy scientist or something. Like maybe there's a difference in class could be interesting.
Okay, actually that sounds like a really cool idea, is that this person who is a runner runs and goes into the rift because that's where their loved one is, or like they basically like have this kind of unrequited love, or maybe it's like an unspoken love with someone who lives or is deep within the rift itself. Yeah. And the only way that they can continue to see them and spend time with them is by running these incredibly dangerous missions into the rift.
Oh, because they're like stationed in the interior of the rift. Like maybe they work there and they talk to each other via the computer, but they want to actually get to them.
Right. Like there's this kind of like, I'm in love with this person. Like this is the only thing that keeps me going, that gives me hope, is to see this person on these missions.
Oh, and there's only one chance for them to get in. So there's like this, the story is the runner. Like they literally have to run their way into the rift.
Essentially, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
All right. Cool. I feel like that will just about wrap it up for our City of 1,000 Echoes, unless Chris has something else that he wants to add.
No, I'm good.
Good. Chris, you can go fuck yourself. I love you, though.
What?
So yeah, that'll just about wrap it up for this episode of Worldbuild with us. Thank you so much for listening. And remember that if you want us to build your world, you can always send us an email to worldbuildwithus@gmail.com, or you can go ahead and shoot us a tweet over at Let's Worldbuild, or you can join our community and talk world building with us pretty much all the time by joining our Discord. Or if you want to shoot to the front of the line and be an incredibly generous person like our patron Jacob, you can always donate to us on Patreon. Link for that in the description. So that'll do it for this week. Remember that we love you very much, and we're going to get through this together.